The Council's verdict. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with quiet conversation as delegates from dozens of species filled the vast, circular hall. Towering insectoid tracks clicked their mandibles in hushed tones. The amphibious Droven whispered through their gills, and the reptilian Zelvari sat rigid, their golden eyes watching the proceedings with disdain. At the center of the room stood a single human, Ambassador Rachel Carter, her jaw tight as she listened to the latest verdict on her species. "The matter is settled," intoned High Chancellor Velrax, a Zelvari elder whose deep, gravelly voice carried authority. "Humanity may join the Galactic Council under probationary status. However, given their history of unchecked violence, emotional instability, and primitive reliance on war, they shall be designated a protected species and barred from military or security roles." A murmur rippled through the chamber, some delegates nodding in agreement, others exchanging uncertain glances. The decision wasn't surprising, but it was insulting. Ambassador Carter took a slow breath, keeping her expression neutral despite the fire in her chest. "With all due respect, Chancellor," she said evenly, "your assessment of humanity is incomplete. We do not seek war, but when forced to fight, we do so with unmatched resolve. We are not fragile children to be protected. We have. You misunderstand, Ambassador." Velrax's voice was laced with condescension. "It is not a matter of capability. It is a matter of temperament. Humans fear war. You avoid it, you mourn it, and when you do fight, it is with hesitation and regret. The Council values peace, and we cannot entrust security to a species that does not embrace battle as a necessity." Laughter, quiet but unmistakable, came from the delegation of the Crothar Dominion. Their representative, a massive, armored brute with crimson-tinted scales, leaned forward. "The human speaks of war as if she has seen one." He bared his sharp teeth in amusement. "How quaint." Ambassador Carter's hand tightened into a fist, but she forced herself to remain still. She knew humanity's history, had read the books, watched the recordings of the wars that shaped Earth. But standing here, in this chamber where war was seen as either a sacred calling or an unfortunate last resort, she understood the problem. These aliens had never met real warriors. They had no concept of what humanity was truly capable of. A soft chime echoed through the chamber. A Droven aide hurried in, whispering urgently to a Zelvari official before stepping back. The official's already pale skin grew even lighter. "Council members," he said, voice tight, "we have received word that Outpost K-72 on the border of Crothar space has fallen under siege. Casualties are mounting. The peacekeeping force is unable to hold." The room fell silent. Even Velrax's smug expression faltered. Ambassador Carter raised an eyebrow. "You need soldiers?" Velrax hesitated before nodding. A slow, knowing smile spread across Carter's face. "Send the Marines, too." The Marines arrive. The warship USS Vengeance dropped out of slipspace above Outpost K-72, its armored hull gleaming against the darkness of space. Inside, Captain Jonathan Reynolds stood with his arms crossed, watching the live tactical feed of the besieged outpost. Alien distress signals poured in, frantic voices overlapping in a chaotic mix of fear and desperation. "Council forces are pinned down inside the Central Command building," reported Gunnery Sergeant Valdez, studying the holographic map. "Crothar warriors have overrun the outer defenses. No evac routes, no reinforcements. They're done if we don't step in now." Reynolds smirked. "Well, Gunny, good thing we're not the quitting type." The Vengeance's hangar bay roared to life as the drop ships prepped for deployment. Rows of armored Marines stood ready, weapons loaded, faces calm. Some cracked jokes, others checked their gear, but none showed fear. The doors hissed open, and the first wave boarded their transports. Down below, the battlefield was chaos. The Crothar, hulking reptilian warriors, stormed the outpost with savage efficiency. Council peacekeepers, trained more for diplomacy than combat, huddled behind makeshift barricades, their energy weapons barely holding the enemy at bay. Then the sky screamed. Drop pods and transports ripped through the atmosphere, their thrusters burning bright. The Crawdar barely had time to react before the first pod slammed into the ground. The hatches exploded outward and outstepped the U.S. Marines. The Council troops, battered and demoralized, stared in disbelief. The Marines didn't hesitate. They moved like a tide, coordinated, aggressive, relentless. Suppressing fire now, barked Valdez, unloading a burst from his rifle as his squad fanned out. Explosions rocked the battlefield as Marine rocket teams targeted enemy artillery. Snipers picked off Crawdar commanders with cold precision. Fire teams weaved through the chaos, covering each other as they advanced, their movements practiced and precise. Inside the command bunker, High General Tavar of the Zelvari watched the feed in shock. He had expected reinforcements, not whatever this was. By the stars, he muttered, eyes wide. They fight like demons. The Crawdar were brutal, but they relied on sheer strength and intimidation. The Marines? They were something else entirely. They adapted, they exploited weaknesses, and most terrifyingly, they enjoyed the fight. One Crawdar warrior charged a Marine, roaring as he swung his massive blade. The Marine sidestepped, slammed a combat knife into the alien's throat, and let the body drop before moving on without a second thought. Within minutes, the battlefield shifted. The Council forces, inspired by the sudden turn, rallied behind the Marines. The outpost wasn't just holding, it was winning. Reynolds knelt beside a wounded Council officer, offering a sip from his canteen. "Relax," he said with a grin. "We got this." The officer, still in shock, whispered, "We were told humans feared war." Reynolds chuckled, reloading his rifle. "Guess you were told wrong. War fighters born and bred." The battle for Outpost K-72 raged on, but the tide had turned. What had started as a desperate defense was now an all-out counteroffensive. The Marines moved like a machine, efficient, ruthless, and relentless. Sergeant Valdez crouched behind a shattered wall, signaling his fire team forward. "Rogers, flank left. Covering fire on my mark." "Copy," Lance Corporal Rogers confirmed, already moving before the order was finished. The Crawdar fought with raw aggression, charging recklessly, expecting their size and strength to overwhelm their enemies. Against the Council's peacekeepers, it had worked. Against the Marines? It was suicide. A Crawdar warrior roared and lunged at Valdez, swinging a massive plasma axe. The sergeant sidestepped, ducked low, and drove his combat knife straight into the alien's exposed ribs. As a warrior gurgled in pain, Valdez twisted the blade and let the body drop. The Zelvari General Tavar watched from the command post, his disbelief deepening with every passing moment. "They fight without fear," he murmured. Ambassador Carter, standing beside him, crossed her arms. "Fear? General, you're looking at the United States Marine Corps. Fear isn't in their vocabulary." Tavar shook his head. "But how? Most species train warriors, yes, but they do not create them the way humans do." Carter glanced at the live feed. A Marine fire team clearing a Crawdar bunker with disciplined, synchronized movements. "You think war is something we try to avoid, and you're right. But that doesn't mean we're bad at it." Tavar turned to her, his golden eyes narrowing. "Tell me, Ambassador, how does a species that fears war create these warriors?" Carter exhaled slowly. "We don't fear war. We respect it. And because we respect it, we prepare for it better than anyone." The general frowned. "Every Marine you see down there, they've been training for this since they were 18, some even younger. Their bodies are broken down and rebuilt to be stronger. Their minds are hardened against fear. They don't just learn to fight, they learn to win." Tavar turned back to the screen. A Crawdar stronghold, one that had held against the Council for days, was falling in less than an hour. The Marines had surrounded it, cutting off escape routes, forcing the enemy to fight on their terms. In the field, a wounded Crawdar warrior groaned as a Marine knelt beside him. The alien, expecting a final blow, growled, "What are you?" The Marine smirked, offering the enemy a field dressing. "We're the good guys," he said, tightening the bandage. "But you'll wish we weren't." Minutes later, the last Krathar line broke. The survivors fled, abandoning their dead. The battle was over. Tavar watched in silence before speaking. "I was wrong." Carter raised an eyebrow. "About what?" The general turned to her, his voice solemn. "The council believed humans feared war. But now I see the truth." He looked back at the battlefield, where Marines stood victorious. "You don't fear war. You master it." A seat at the table. Smoke still lingered over Outpost K-72, the battlefield littered with the wreckage of war. The Krathar had retreated, leaving behind their dead and wounded, while the Marines stood victorious. The once demoralized Council forces now moved with purpose, securing the area under Marine guidance. Captain Reynolds surveyed the aftermath, wiping dust from his visor. His Marines moved through the rubble, assisting the wounded, both human and alien. War wasn't just about fighting, it was about winning and ensuring the ones left standing could rebuild. At the Outpost Command Center, General Tavar, Ambassador Carter, and several high-ranking council officials reviewed the battle reports. Tavar's expression was unreadable as he turned to Reynolds. "You saved this outpost." Reynolds smirked. "That's our job, sir." The Zelvari general hesitated before nodding. "You have my respect, Captain." He glanced at Carter. "And my apology. We misjudged your people." Carter folded her arms. "You didn't misjudge us. You underestimated us." She stepped forward, placing a data pad on the table. "This is my official request to revisit humanity's status in the Galactic Council." Chancellor Velrax, silent until now, exhaled sharply. The elder Zelvari still looked shaken from the battle. "The Council classified humanity as a protected species because we believed you lacked the temperament for war." His golden eyes studied Reynolds and his Marines. "Clearly, we were mistaken." Reynolds shrugged. "You weren't entirely wrong. Most humans do fear war. We fight so they don't have to." He gestured to his troops. "But when war comes, we don't run from it. We end it." Silence filled the room. The council officials exchanged glances, then Velrax sighed. "This is not a decision we make lightly." Tavar's voice was firm. "The Marines have already proven themselves. Without them, this outpost would have fallen." Velrax looked at Carter, then at Reynolds, before nodding. "Humanity will be granted full membership within the Galactic Council, with military privileges." A slow smile spread across Carter's face. "Good choice." Hours later, as the Marines prepared for departure, Tavar approached Reynolds. "Captain, I once believed only the Zelvari were true warriors. But I see now, humans do not just fight. You study war, refine it, and wield it like a master craftsman with a blade." Reynolds chuckled, securing his rifle. "War's an ugly thing, General. We just make sure we're uglier." As the USS Vengeance lifted off, the Council watched, knowing the galaxy had changed. Humanity was no longer just another species. They were warriors, protectors, and, now, an undeniable force among the stars. Velrax turned to Carter. "Tell me, Ambassador, what do humans say about war?" Carter smiled, watching the Marine dropships disappear into the sky. "They say Marines don't start wars, Chancellor. We just finish them."